Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Katie Summerville, and this is Andrew Bohnet, and we have a great guest with us today, Adrian Smith.
But before we start, Katie, you have an important question to ask Adrian.
Are tax people boring?
No chance, Katie.
So, Adrian, you've been in tax a long time. I think anybody watching the podcast probably wouldn't believe your age because you look a very young man for the experience that you've got. Tell us a little bit how you got into tax, and also you were in early stages of when IPT was first introduced. So if you can talk about that as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, no problem at all, Andrew. Well, for me, I always wanted to be a professional footballer. Didn't quite work out, and I therefore took my second choice, which was join the Metropolitan Police Cadets. And I always remember my career teacher saying to me, Adrian, you've got no chance. I said, last year there were 40,000 applicants for 200 jobs. And I thought, what the heck, I'm going to go for it anyway. And I got in. And in fact, by the end of my time there, I was a top 10 cadet. And for me, it was great, but I want to be back in my home county of Suffolk, back in Ipswich. So I went to transfer to Suffolk Police. At the time, you couldn't do a simple transfer. You had to leave one force to go to another. So I applied to go into Customs and Excise, thinking, get in uniform, go on the cutters, go down the docks, find drugs, this kind of thing. Didn't quite work like that. I got put into VAT registration. I didn't even know Customs did VAT. So for me, that was the start of my tax journey. But with anything, it's all about giving you all, why you do a job you don't find interesting. Yeah, get into it, see if you can make it interesting. And very soon, VAT registration to me was fun. I did that for 10 years. I did get some time in uniform, but then went back to VAT on promotion, large trader. And during that time, I was facing insurance companies, but not really looking at their core insurance activities. It didn't really play into VAT.
So a quick change in more than one way, so people watching the podcast may pick up on that one. Adrian, what's your favourite sports team?
Ipswich Town.
How many books have you written or / published?
Well, I've written 18, and 14 of those have been published. You can find on Amazon and any good bookshop.
I love that, a bit of PR.
If you could choose one, summer or winter, what would it be? And bearing in mind you're in the Middle East at the moment, this answer may be conditional to where you're currently living.
The grass is always greener. At the moment, winter, 100%.
Would you rather travel to the past or to the future?
The past.
Why?
I can meet up with loved ones that are no longer with me.
Really good.
Oh.
Actually, that's a really good. That's a really good answer. I've never thought of it in that way. I suppose I've always thought of it as a meeting famous people or going to see how something worked. But actually, the past doesn't have to be 200-300 years, right? It could just be, 50 years. You do a lot of travel. What's your travel item you can't do without, or travel items?
My itinerary.
Organised, I like it. Can you speak more than one language?
No.
You and me both.
I can speak about 6 words of Arabic. Is that count?
Yeah, thank you, and
Please.
let's go. Yeah. What's the best bit of advice you've ever been given, either in the tax world or non-tax world?
Nothing's impossible. So reach for the sky and don't be afraid.
I think that's really good. One of my my philosophies, well, I've got 2 philosophies in life. One is live to tell the stories, not listen to people tell theirs. So, it's go out there, do it, right? As you say, be confident. Nothing's impossible. If you want to go and do something, you should be able to do it. And the other one is take the opportunity. And if the opportunity isn't there, create it yourself, because you're never going to win the lottery if you don't buy the ticket.
So what is your tax ick? So
the biggest issue I have is with people that find tax people boring. So very, very connected with the podcast. And for me, over the years, it's been a case of trying to create that excitement about tax. And I think over the 41 years I've been involved, I've done a bit of that.
I think that's actually a really interesting response. I've never really thought of it in that way, but actually a lot of what we've done on the podcast is talking about how you communicate, or how tax teams communicate, how the fact that tax teams are involved in pretty much every part of the business, how that tax team should be involved in every part of the business to make sure that people don't, agree to something, sign a contract that can have a negative impact, or, do something that could be non-compliant. And so actually that, people that find tax boring, or tax people boring, and in effect, therefore avoiding them, is actually a really big problem, when really they should be using and working with the tax teams to make sure that they can actually get as much information and do their job as well as possible. So I think that's really good.
I think it's a two-way street, Andrew. For me, it's all about you've got to create that enthusiasm. Yeah. And if somebody conveys boring tax, then it doesn't matter how much technical input you can give, you just won't connect with the individual. And I think it's important in this case to create relationships with everyone you work with. That's so important. If you get the relationship built, and you can develop a relationship as you see fit. I've got my own hidden ways of doing that, some not so hidden, and that works really well. And I think once you get rid of the barriers, you can have sensible conversations, and that's where you can really create, I think, a formidable combined approach to any tax issue that can affect the business.
Yeah, I think that's great answer. And I actually think that's one of the things that's generally missing is like an effort or a push to get tax more involved. Other people who spoke to on the podcast, Sarah most recently said that her goal is to basically be able to find ways of communicating or getting that message across, so that tax is seen as a good place to go, rather than let's avoid it.
Yeah, and I think over the years, certainly with that small taxable insurance premium tax, there was a lot of we had to consider IPT, but very much as an afterthought. I was more into IPT should be at the forefront of all these commercial discussions. So it was a case of how do we get people connected.
I think it's about breaking the stigma, isn't it, as well, though? Because I think there's such a stigma. I agree. I think there's such a stigma around tax, people that work in tax, that but it is boring. It's a boring subject. But I think it is definitely about creating those relationships, about things like hobbies, and getting past those barriers of just talking about tax and getting to know people. That definitely helps you get ahead in this industry.
Yeah, everyone's human after all, right?
Yeah, everyone's human, exactly. So if you could predict one major shift in tax compliance over the next 10 years, what do you think it would be?
It's definitely going to be around AI and automation. The way things are developing, certainly since I've been in the Middle East.
So where you've said AI is over the next 10 years, but do you think, could you be a bit more precise where you think AI could potentially be used where it isn't being used now? That could actually be, maybe a bit of a game changer, either for the taxpayer or the tax authorities.
Well, I think, certainly creating the ability to inform the business, whether it's on the advisory side as opposed to compliance, isn't a step too far. If we go back 5 years, it would have been totally beyond any realms of imagination. But seeing the speed of change that AI has, I think the only thing holding us back is imagination.
Yeah, and lawyers. Well, the reason why I say that, I suppose a bit, is tax. A lot of legislation that is written, from a tax point of view, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't happen because there's a fear that it could breach privacy or, laws like that. When I said, therefore, some features or functionality that could be really, really beneficial are then just completely ignored or not done, and it almost to the detriment of what's trying to be achieved. And I think, depending on the tax authorities you speak to, some are very much governed completely by the lawyers, and others are, okay, well, I understand what you're saying, but let's find a solution around that. And I think there's a big difference at the moment. So that's the reason why I said lawyers. It wasn't a dig at lawyers. It was more a case of how we get around where a lawyer says, no, you can't do that because of X. It's like, okay, well, let's do it this way then instead. And that then makes everybody happy.
And what is quite interesting here, that question you just asked, Andrew, for me, having now been doing tax since the end of 1983, when I started doing VAT, there were no computers. It was all handwritten. We had pool typers that used to type out the official letters that we had to send in companies, but everything was handwritten. Twice a day, you had a messenger come around, picking up a transit envelope and taking that handwritten document somewhere around the UK or maybe even further afield. And, that would take days and days to arrive at destination. The person at destination would write response. And you'd be looking at 2 to 3 weeks to actually get something moving forward. Today with emails, seconds. And, the great CC everybody in the world in, really does ramp things up. So I think the whole dynamics have changed in the short time I've been involved, and for me, thinking about AI it's almost like science fiction. Incredible.
Yeah, it is. It is. Adrian, you are one of the sort of the founding fathers, I suppose, of IPT tax. Do you think that is something that also is going to evolve in the next sort of 5-10 years?
IPT came in about 10 years after I started my life in tax, and I was given the opportunity to get involved, helping introduce it into East Anglia for the UK Fiscal Authority. And it was a real opportunity to get to understand what insurance companies really did. I was involved in VAT, large trader control, and dealing with insurance companies, but we never looked at their core insurance activities. Now, it came a long way in those first 2 or 3 years, and we saw the standard rate of IPT increase from 2.5% up to 12% for a blink of an eye in terms of the UK. But it was more than that. It was a case of initially, no one really cared about IPT, whether it was advisors, whether it was companies. But slowly but surely, the mood changed, particularly as the rates started increasing. And then came the concern about multinationals. So to start with, it's just UK, but then what happens if a company is writing cross-border? Whether it's across the EU or more broadly globally. And I think what happened in those first 5-6 years were quite extraordinary, the speed of mindset change. Where we are now, I think certainly the UK market is more well aware of what IPT is about. There are systems in place. There are specialist IPT people in place, be it in-house or at boutique advisory companies. And over the next few years, again, the goalposts can shift, but I don't think they're going to shift at exactly the same kind of rate we saw originally.
Unless I suppose there is a different type of insurance, like linked to AI, that then changes the dynamics in how it can be applied, and that could be a catalyst. But otherwise, I think it's pretty structured now, isn't it? So maybe the future trends are more linked to the compliance and reporting, which is just general around all of the tax, the data being used in AI, being able to find where things where fraud.
But is there still the same excitement in IPT that there was early on? I don't think there is. And I think it needs more excitement. IPT is a very exciting area. And certainly some of the work I've been involved in over the years has really been not just looking at IPT, but really looking at the way business is structured, and are there different ways that business can be structured in order to ensure that IPT is correctly accounted for. And for me, that was a real buzz, and it still is. That's what gets me up in the morning. Tax is exciting, and seeing how people get illuminated by the mention of tax towards the end of the conversation I have with them still makes it, for me, working up in the morning and doing tax.
Yeah, it's one of those subjects where if you understand it and you realize it isn't actually that scary, there's rules around it. There's, it touches so many parts of the business. You never do the same project, the same job, never do it twice. It's always different. If you're someone that doesn't want to work in a job which is like a factory where you just do the same thing over and over and over again, tax is great to get into because you're never going to do the same thing again. Even preparing the reports and everything else, there's always a level of compliance, investigation, trying to solve problems. Obviously, you have tax technology, you have all the communication that you need to work with the rest of the business. You have to be a tax business partner in effect. So there's so many skill sets that you need to be in tax, and therefore it makes it such a diverse and interesting role.
Yeah, now I know, as a conversation starter at parties and that kind of thing, people always ask, what do you do for work? And when I respond, tax advisor, it's a quick, oh, okay, then move on to the next subject. But I always try to get them re-engaged. And, for me, what I'm fascinated about nowadays is that a lot of people, particularly in the Middle East, but even in the UK now, choose tax as a profession. In my day when I started off, people fell into tax. For me, I wanted to be a professional footballer. Didn't quite work out. And I then decided my next ambition was to become a policeman. And in between changing from Metropolitan Police to Suffolk Police, I got what I thought was going to be 2 or 3 months in customs excise. I thought I'd get into uniform, get on the cutters down the docks, and got posted into VAT registration. I didn't even realise customs excise did VAT. That's how I started off. And actually, a lot of the people I worked with were in the same boat. They literally had no idea what tax was, possibly like myself, didn't really care too much about it, but embraced the opportunity. And, 41 years later, still enjoying it as much as I did on that first few days in VAT registration.
How was, working like with the, being that first with IPT, did it take you anywhere else? Did you, as you became that expert, being an earlier sort of influencer, adopter, and did you start doing more? Did that sort of expand your career in any particular way?
It expanded it in a lot of different directions. Now, I thought IPT and being there at the beginning was like being a pioneer in the Wild West in the US. The opportunity to delve into areas that not only I, but no one had really delved into before. And that, to me, really gave me the opportunity to accelerate my career. I think with VAT, it had been around since 1973, 10 years by the time I got involved in it. And there were far more intelligent people doing VAT for much longer than I. And clearly had looked at a lot of nooks and crannies, whereas IPT was a greenfield site. And I was the only full-time IPT senior officer ever in customs excise. And, when I joined the advisory part of the landscape, there was no need for IPT advisors. So I came in, asked to do VAT, but very quickly, I identified there wasn't need. Some of my old contacts that I dealt with from the customs side then contacted me saying, can you help us? Now you're an advisor. So it was a natural progression. And then slowly but surely, I convinced people I worked with that it was a good idea to focus purely on IPT. And that was the start of it. And what was a real testament to what we were doing was that other firms start to follow. They got people focusing on IPT. And there were boutique companies set up on the compliance side, primarily, reaching out, offering IPT services. So it really felt as though, you were ahead of the game. With all these things, to stay ahead of the game, you've got to continually evolve. And for me, that was where the fun part of the job came in, coming up with new ways of working, new ideas, new ways to excite the market. And for me, imagination, a bit like AI, gave you the opportunity to still be ahead of the curve.
And what were some of those ideas? What were you able to do, to change the direction, so to speak? What did you come up with that, continued that, not only your passion, but actually the industry?
Yeah, I think one of the best ideas that came up with was, it was one evening when I was watching Coronation Street, and it was going back to, where were we, about 2001. And I was aware there was a lot of issues in the marketplace with insurance companies losing a lot of business to third-party service companies, such as electrical retailers. You go along buy a washing machine, and typically you'd be sold a mechanical breakdown insurance type of policy and extended warranty policy. And instead of that, because the higher rate of IPT was introduced, companies decided they would sell a VAT backed model, so that instead of just paying higher rate IPT, they would pay standard rate VAT, but be able to recover the VAT on overhead, so head costs, admin, this kind of thing. So instead of 17.5% IPT, 17.5% VAT, depending on the claims experience, the admin costs, 17.5% reduced to about between 11 and 14%. Now, the insurance companies lost a whole area of their business to these service companies, and they wanted to win them back, but they couldn't think of a way of doing it. And then, after this Correlation Street episode, performance bonds, performance guarantees came to mind. Now, they have a most unusual position in UK and in some ways European taxes. For the UK, they are regarded as an insurance contract for VAT purposes if they've written a suretyship on the insurer. But for IPT purposes, they are contracts of guarantee, not contracts of insurance. So therefore, they're not subject to IPT. So on one hand, you've got something that's exempt from VAT, but on the other hand, that's something that's outside the scope of IPT. So it really did get the interest of insurance companies, and it meant that tax was at the forefront of the commercial vision of these organisations. It was the start of some great innovation, largely multinational innovation, but that was something I still love to this day because it really did shape the market and it put IPT very much on the boardroom table. We set up the European IPT group, and I thought it would be a great idea to have a European IPT conference. And once a year, we would have a conference at a different location around Europe. And we got the same clients, generally, and 70% of the delegates would come year on year. And it would be our annual get together. And it became almost like a family rather than a conference. And when we came back to London in 2014, just to make it even more exciting, we decided we would hire the Tower of London out for the evening to put a client event on. And from the conference facilities, we got a London double-decker Route Master bus, one of the old ones. And all the clients got on. And for the European clients, they loved it, but they hadn't seen one of the old Route Masters, possibly for many, many years, if at all. And we all got on this bus and we went to the Tower of London. And we had this, you remember the signs on the front of the buses? This one said, European IPT Tour. And it was almost like, Ipswich going into Europe playing football like we used to in the 80s, except we were talking IPT and we were on the London double-decker bus in the heart of London. We arrived at the Tower of London, and as we were trying to get off the bus, we had a few tourists trying to get on the bus. So we were trying to keep them at bay. But then again, thinking about it in hindsight, we should have let them get on the bus because there'd have been even more people excited about it.
That would have been quite funny. Normally it's, as you say, in a dinner party, you can say you do tax and then you can avoid the conversation if you don't want to speak to them. But when, as the bus is moving, they can't get away at all. So that would have been quite...
It's Andrew's dream, that.
Yeah. Well, you currently are spend your time in between Saudi and Bahrain. I know you're a massive sports fan as well. Have you, Saudi are doing a lot, to encourage sports, spend a lot of money to bring it to the region. Have you been, seen any of the results of that? Have you been to any sort of football matches or anything like that? Is the atmosphere any good? Or do you think it's all a bit of a sham?
Well, from afar, I would certainly have thought it was all a sham. You see all the boxing and that being hosted. But actually, when I came here and getting in the taxis in the morning way to work, where the taxi driver spoke English, which doesn't happen too much in Jeddah, but certainly does in Bahrain, you'll be surprised just how many people actually like football. Not just the Premier League, but the Saudi National League. And what those in Jeddah that do speak English are absolutely fanatical about football. More so in some ways than a lot of us English people, may I say. And, I had the good fortune of going along to the game in Jeddah a few weeks ago where Ronaldo was playing. Never seen Ronaldo play live before. And to be honest, he didn't play that much. He's now couple of years younger than me, I think, and 40 odd. And he was doing the necessary. I think it's on about $20 million per game or whatever. But it was a great event. And what surprised me was you had the opposing fans sitting with each other, something that, okay, you see occasionally in the English game, but didn't for many years as I was growing up. But the other thing that really astounded me was, unlike the UK where you get peaks and troughs of chanting, it was continuous throughout the game. The whole 95 minutes the game played. It was quite electric. And thinking back to the last World Cup, and I've spoken with a number of locals about it, when Saudi Arabia beat Argentina during the group stages, the following day was declared a national holiday in Saudi Arabia. I mean, can you imagine that in England? Wouldn't happen. Who knows? One day we may win the Men's World Cup. Hopefully, in my lifetime. I was around when the last one was won. Apparently, I was 9 months old, and my dad said I definitely did watch it. I can't remember it, but there we go. So I think the game. And come back to your question, Andrew, is it a sham over here? I don't think it is. I think everybody's passionate. Since I've been here, the World Cup, I think it's the 2034 World Cup has been announced, coming to Saudi Arabia. What a great feat. And seeing what happened in Qatar a few years ago, the World Cup there, I think it's going to be great, not just for the region, but for the beautiful game.
I know sport's a massive passion, and I know that you've been quite involved in running, and that's been a big part of your life as well. Can you sort of talk about that? Because you've got a really great story, not just about the running, but what it also then led to in some of your other exciting sort of badges that you have, for your life.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, running was something that started off when I restarted when I went to Switzerland in when was that, 2009, and by then I'd started to get middle-age ways of eating, so put on a bit of excess weight. And my wife and 2 of my 3 children came across for the school holidays. And I can remember saying to my wife, when you go back, I'm going to start running. And we lived on a mountain in Zurich, and I thought I'd go up and down there every day. That would be good. I hadn't run for 25 years. Used to do a lot of running, used to play a lot of football. And for me, it seemed easy until I tried doing it. I can remember going, my wife and kids going back home after some holiday, and my wife rang me up one night and said, "Have you been running today?" I said, "No." She said, "You said you were going to start running when we went home." And anyway, she asked again the following night. I still hadn't done it. And then the third night, I got home from work and I thought, I'll put on some trainers. I don't even think I had any decent clothes to run in. And I went outside, went running up to the park where we took our kids to play each day. I didn't realise just how steep the mountain was. I got about 100 yards, and the sheer pain in my legs, in my chest, I was thinking, I can't do this. And being a runner, I never wanted to stop running. Always keep running, never would. But that day I couldn't do it. But I ran for something like 20 seconds, and I got home that night. My wife rang up, and she said, "So, you've been running today?" And the joy in my voice when I responded, "Yes, I have." Didn't say for how long. And of course, this continued. Every night I got back from work, and I'd go out, and slowly but surely, I'd run further each day. But rather than running straight up the mountain, I used my nous, I was a bit innovative, and I zigzagged up the mountain. And I'd remember the day, 2 weeks after I started running, I got to the top of the mountain without stopping, without walking. And that to me was a rocky moment, where you sort of get up to the top of the steps and, I've done it. And my wife's tone changed about 2 weeks in. Rather than ring me up and say, "Have you been running today?" she would say, "I hope you haven't been running today." And of course, I said, "Yeah." For me, it was real joy. I was beating her. It was the game. And slowly but surely, I became fitter, faster, stronger. I was fitter than Beckham for a short time. This was the time he did his metatarsal in the World Cup, if you remember. And I was much fitter. 10 years older, much fitter. And the weight came off. and I felt on top of the world. And it was the 22nd of May 2010. I was back in the UK running one Saturday morning, and I decided to run further than I'd ever run before. I ran for 2 hours and 9 minutes, which was, at the time, I think, the marathon world record. And it wasn't quite marathon distance. It was about 13 miles. But I got back home, and I thought my legs don't feel quite right. And I decided I'd lay down. And then I went to get up, only to realise that my legs couldn't feel them. This is strange. And my wife came up, seeing what was going on, and almost like kicked me out of bed. And as I stood, the pain hit. That was the start of what was quite a terrible journey of loads and loads of spinal operations, 23 in total, 10 major ones. They rebuilt me. They made me the second $6 million man without the $6 million. And what it did was create a situation where I couldn't run. In fact, for a time, I couldn't even walk. Work was very, very difficult. And in between operations, I would struggle back to work, but then push myself too hard and have another operation. Same thing again. So, for me, that was a really difficult part of the life. 14 years. It took to really repair to a state where I could not only walk, but since I've been over here, I've been able to jog again. And I've done some running. I even did a little bit of sprinting. Up until the 23rd of November last year, when one of my good friends and I went to the edge of the world just outside Riyadh, a bit like the Grand Canyon. And by that stage, I started doing a bit of jumping, for the camera, because it looked really good in my football kit. And I decided to do a bit of jumping, and I decided to walk up this steep slope of this mountain, got to the top, great view. And then as I came down, I slipped and ended up coming down very fast. And I didn't quite fall off the mountain, but injured both ankles and feet in the process, tendons. So now I'm not quite back to where I was in 2010, but nevertheless, it's taken a bit of a backseat, the exercise. But what has come out of these running experiences has been the opportunity to learn new skills. And one of those was writing books. It all came about, I got onto taxis in London, and the cabbies would say to me, "Sim, by the way, what's up?" And I'd tell them about the running. And they said, "Sounds really interesting. You should write a book, Adrian." And after one operation, I thought, why not? So with that, I wrote a book. And here's one here, actually signed by the author. And this was 2017.
That was signed by the architect.
Yeah, by the architect. Quite right. Good one, yeah. And it's a book of two halves, as someone said to me. The first half is all about fitter, faster, stronger. Pushing yourself to where you once were. And trying to reach even greater heights than you've ever reached before. The second half was about human endurance and fighting the fight, trying to get back to where you were at the start of the book. And what I would say is that this book, I didn't quite get back to where I was at the start of the book. And in fact, I did, this is a 7-inch version, I did a 12-inch version, extended edition, which had a few extra chapters. And there was the glint of light that things were starting to come back to normal.
But what would you say would be a takeaway message?
I think the takeaway message is, never give up. That there is always the opportunity to improve your position. So, for me, it was the start of writing many books. I've now written 18, all different genres, and I've written quite a few fiction books. I can't stand reading fiction, but there's something quite exciting about writing it. I don't know if any of you remember, as a kid, there were books out there where you could choose the ending. Depending on if you turn left or right in the corridor, you then went to page 27, page 50. And I thought, it's just like that, So I came up with a character, Hong Kong Tom, loosely based on my dad, who was called Tom and lived in Hong Kong. There he is, with a very dashing young man with hair. And it was all about Tom living in Hong Kong, and he was a secret agent. So yeah, MI6, and it was fun just going into a completely different area. Yeah, not tax, somewhere where again you could be innovative. And whilst I'd have a straw man, yeah, in terms of the direction the book was going in, I just let my creative juices flow. And the book was going to be called In Search of Hong Kong Top. And yeah, for me, it was fascinating. And there are a lot of parallels, yeah, in writing books to writing tax advice. Yeah, you've got to make sure that you have all the facts and you don't miss anything when you give the advice. So come back to an earlier question you asked, Andrew. For me, running opened up a lot of different doors for me, some of which I'd never imagined. Going into all various hospitals, getting these operations done, meeting different people, was again a different area. And for me, a lot of the operations were done in northwest London, just around the corner from Abbey Road. And being a big Beatles fan, Paul McCartney fan, the amount of times I walked across that crossing, outrageous. But I loved it.
So obviously you spoke about there, like the real highs of running, right? Building yourself up to that point, being able to run up the mountain, to then obviously what must have been a real low for you, having losing the feeling in your legs and then having to go through all of these operations and, juggle work, amongst that. So how would you say writing helped you during your recovery?
For me, it was a release. There was a lot of inactivity. I'd gone from not quite super fit, but very fit, into not being able to do anything, literally not being able to walk one end of the house to the other without having to sit down in between. It was a really dark time, but writing gave me an outlet, gave me the opportunity to forget about what was happening in the real world and delving into this completely different area. And for me, it was really, really good, really beneficial. There's only so much bargain hunt you can watch during the day. There's only so much football you can watch, or I'm allowed to watch at home. So, for me, writing books, 6 or 7 pages a day was on average what it was. The books generally 350, 450 pages. So a lot of days you spent doing it. Now, some days you'd only write 2 or 3 pages. Other days it could be 10, very rarely more than 10. But that would be 3 or 4 hours worth of writing, a lot. And some days you would wake up and you would think, hang on, yesterday I went in that direction. I didn't really want to go in that direction. So you would end up almost scrapping the previous day and starting again. So it was, for me, it gave me something to focus on. I guess I'm a bit OCD. I like the focus. And having done tax for so many years, it's all about the focus. You can't be gone to win. You've got to make sure you've got a clear direction of travel, and you've got to some degree stick to that. And for me, writing gave me that direction of travel, gave me a reason to get up that day and do something that I thought was meaningful, other than tax.
I think that message is really important, in general, and what you've written in that first book sounds like it really does provide that inspiration, because I think no matter, whether you work in tax or whether you work in any industry or just in life in general, it does show that real determination and hard work can get you to where you want to be, and to not lose that focus or that drive because you're going through a tough time. Because ultimately everyone goes through tough times in life, whether it be the extremes or the small things. I think especially in the world that we live in today, with the effects of mental health and the changes that's also had on the workplace and working. I think that really does give an important message of endurance, and it really is quite inspirational.
I think for me, never give up. Anything's possible. It is a real kind of motto that has lived with me throughout my days, and hopefully I'll continue for many more to come. I spent a few years off work because of the injury, and it was almost going to define me, but I wasn't going to let it. I wanted to do something that I wanted to do. I wanted to get back to tax, get back to where I once belonged, as the people saying, get back. And I wanted to go out on my terms. So to get the opportunity to come over to the Middle East really was possibly a big challenge, possibly bigger than I'd originally intended. But all these things, when the opportunity came up, and I talked to my wife about it, had a seed was sown, and I got the bug. And I thought, yeah, fitter, faster, stronger. I'm going to go up that mountain. And sure enough, coming here, it was really giving me that renewed purpose, and really giving me the feeling that I am in control of my own destiny. And that to me is what it's all about. And I thoroughly love the experience. I continue to love it. It's very hot here. It's getting hotter. Today's 38, but it will be getting late 40s in the next couple of months, as you well know, Andrew. And walking around in the suit is character building, shall we say. But it's no different to running. Again, it's another challenge, and I love challenges. So for me, 41 years of tax isn't about just coming in, doing the same old. It's about continually pushing yourself, looking for new opportunities, looking for new challenges, and then facing them head on. And who dares wins. And for me, retirement isn't too far away now, and it's all about I'm going to go out on my terms. And that to me is so important. If I'd have retired a few years ago because of the injury, that would have been not a great legacy. But this, I hope it's. And for me, I love the experience. So long may it continue.
With that, I think it's been a fantastic podcast, Adrian. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to what you do next I think you've taken on so many different things that, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear that you're on the top of Mount Everest or something along those lines. But thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to meeting you when I'm next out in Saudi.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.